Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Auspol Explained. I'm your host, David, and I'm here to ask you, dear audience member, to stop telling me that local government doesn't exist. Really, please, just stop. I'm tired. To be fair, most of you are probably thinking right now, but of course local government exists. That's obvious. Why would this be controversial? But there is a small subsection of people who are incredibly passionate, shall we say, about the existence of what they appear to think is a forbidden and not real third tier of government. This is not a joke, this is not an April Fool's prank. It's an actual thing that people complain about. Perhaps, maybe, it is because the local council said that their idea for a new shed violated some zoning laws. I don't know. It does not matter what the motivations are. It sounds like potentially a conspiracy theory, but if it is true, then why does someone keep collecting my rubbish once a week? Huh? Why? If not the local council, then who? The Freemasons? Pfft, don't be absurd. The Freemasons are as real as Bigfoot. So, this episode is all about addressing the concerns that the local government exists. So first off, it's not in the Constitution. You got me. The number one complaint I get about local government is that it's not in the Constitution. You're right. I've been foiled immediately. Local government is not mentioned in the federal constitution. You know what isn't either? The Prime Minister. And yet, spoilers, we still have one. Technically, we don't need a Prime Minister, but much like people who look after local roads and libraries, Australia has collectively let it slide that such a role exists. Speaking of Prime Ministers and local government, fun fact, multiple Prime Ministers have previously been in local councils. John Gorton, Ben Chifley, Earl Page, Arthur Fadden, all have served on local councils before becoming Prime Ministers. In fact, nearly a third of members in the first federal parliament in 1901 had been in local councils. Some of the members of that very first parliament were involved in the writing of the very Constitution of Australia that does not mention the existence of local government, nor does it mention kangaroos, but, you know, they're real. Fun fact, I'm gonna blow this conspiracy wide open. You know what also exists? More than one constitution. I'm not talking about the secret hidden shadow constitution that gives us the extra forbidden laws. That one is not for you to know about. And a member of the Illuminati is on their way right now, coming to your house to wipe your memory of any mention of the shadow constitution before finding me too and finally silencing me. What I'm talking about is the states. Each state has its own constitution. Amazing. Parliaments tend to have those. And these constitutions existed long before the federal government did. It's from this that the states have given themselves the power to create and alter local governments. The federal constitution is about federal responsibilities, but as local government is a state responsibility, it doesn't need to be mentioned. Imagine reading a job application and in it lists someone else's responsibilities that have nothing to do with your job. That'd be super weird. Local government predates federal government by like 60 years, because the first one in Australia was in Adelaide in 1840. So I don't think this is particularly that much of a gotcha moment as people tend to think it is. Local governments were created to divide the responsibilities up between multiple bodies. So in the 19th century, state governments decided that certain things like drainage, water supply, roads and other local infrastructure should be taken care by someone local. And so local councils were created to deal with those local issues, while the larger government took care of things that weren't area specific, like education. But we've had referendums about local governments, and they've all failed. Yes, We have had multiple referendums about recognition of local government in the federal constitution. That is the second biggest problem that people like to bring up in the comments for some reason. So hey, because people in the comments keep telling me to do my own research, I will. I will do that right now. Let's get into those referendums. There were two. 1974 and 1988. If you don't know, a referendum is the method for changing the constitution. Basically, a specific change to the constitution is put forward to the public to be voted on. It requires a majority of people and a majority of states to vote yes, so it's not something that is often successful. The 1974 referendum asked if the Commonwealth could grant financial assistance directly to local government and borrow money on their behalf. Simple, right? Well, here's the thing. Section 96 of the Federal Constitution says that Parliament can provide financial assistance to the states on terms and conditions of which the Parliament chooses. So, because of this, the Constitution technically already has a provision where the federal government can financially support local governments via grants to the states that oversee those local governments. It's indirect, but it's there, and it's not exactly a legal loophole that's rarely ever used. Labour Prime Minister Gough Whitlam took advantage of this back in the 70s by increasing funding to local government via the states. He increased funding from $7.5 million in 1972 to 73 to $165,327,000 in 1975 to 76, which allowed for new programs such as senior citizen centres, sewerage backlog, leisure facilities, national estate, urban transport and tourism. But Whitlam couldn't directly fund local government, which he believed should play a bigger part in Australia's political system. So he decided to take this issue to a referendum to remove any constitutional ambiguity. The Liberal Country Coalition framed this referendum as a way to undermine the power of the states, as it would give more power to the federal government over local issues. They argued, why should someone in Canberra be able to decide what a local government on the other side of the country has funding for? Labour countered that it would be cooperative federalism, which would be built upon the idea that 3 tiers of government are equal. They said that local government is the creation of the states, and that isn't being undermined, but that it was the states that have undermined local government. And like most referendums, especially ones that are seen to increase government powers, this one failed. Only New South Wales had more than 50% of a yes vote, and even then, barely. It was not very popular. But again, this doesn't mean governments can't fund local councils. Fast forward a few years and Liberal Prime Minister John Howard was directly funding local governments with the Roads to Recovery program that gave over $2.4 billion to local councils over several years to spend on upgrades, maintaining and construction of local roads. So as you can see, both Liberal and Labor Prime Ministers have given money to support local governments. It's just that how that relationship is defined in the Constitution is the bit where the parties have historically differed. Let's move on. The 1988 referendum asked if local government should be recognised in the Commonwealth Constitution. This, I feel like, is a big contention with some people. They're like, see, it's not recognised because it failed, right? The federal government, unlike some people in the comments section, already recognised the role and importance of the local government. So they tried to put it in the Constitution, right? This referendum, introduced by Labour Prime Minister Bob Hawke, wouldn't have taken away the responsibility of local councils from the states. It wasn't even about the federal government funding local governments. It said basically that states kinda had to have local governments. Admittedly, they all wish to. But, you know, if from decades from now a state changes its mind and is like, no more local councils at all, under the current legal system they could. The proposed section 119A said, each state shall provide for the establishment and continuance of a system of local government, with the local government bodies elected in accordance with the laws of the state, and empowered to administer and to make bylaws for their respective areas in accordance with the laws of the state. At the time, the Liberal opposition was not a fan, and they said that this referendum may appear harmless, but it would lay the foundations for greater power for Canberra to wield, and thus should be defeated. And as do most referendums, especially ones that appear to increase government powers, it failed. This time by an even bigger margin than the 1974 one. Now, fellow sleuths and Blues Clues fans will have noticed that neither of these referendums are really about, creating local governments that did not previously exist. Because they do exist. And one of the referendums was asking if the federal government could change its relationship and responsibilities to local government. But wait, there's another referendum, which never happened. Sometimes governments come up with ideas and don't manage to make them happen, or give up on them. This is one of those things. The idea of altering the constitution for the sake of local government has not disappeared into the vast depths of history, much like how I wish people who comment local government doesn't exist would. In 2013, a proposed referendum to amend section 96 of the Constitution to allow the federal government to directly fund local governments was passed in both houses. That means both Labor and the Liberal Party voted for it to happen, with the exception of 7 members of the Liberal Party who voted against it. The referendum was planned to take place on the same day as the 2013 election. However, the election was changed to an earlier date, and that meant that the referendum had to be postponed. And when Tony Abbott, Liberal Prime Minister, won the election, he decided not to pursue it, even though he'd previously supported it. Polling suggested that it wouldn't pass, and so the idea was put to rest. For now. Time is a flat circle, and in 10 years' time we could be discussing the merits and flaws of recognising local government in the federal constitution. Because it seems to come up every decade or 3, so who knows? Who can really predict the future? Hopefully, by the time we next bring up this issue, this video will have been viewed by every single Australian because you have shared it to every single person you know, and thus we will all be united in the knowledge, or just bitter acceptance, that local government exists, and so there'll be one less layer of discourse between the different sides that we can do away with. We don't all need to agree on the federal government's relationship with local government, but it would be nice if we all just accepted that local government is super duper real. It's real. It's allowed to exist. Please. It's been decades on from Whitlam's desire to see direct funding from the Commonwealth go to local government. And although the Liberal Party has both opposed and agreed with the idea over the years, we still have not had enough national support to make it enshrined in the Constitution. I have had comments telling me that there were 4, not 2 failed referendums, and of course they are talking about the secret hidden shadow referendums. That is of course forbidden knowledge to have, and so a representative of the Illuminati is coming to your house once again to erase memory of me ever mentioning it. Please make sure, if you rewatch this video and relearn such forbidden knowledge about the shadow constitution and shadow referendum, make sure it's at a convenient time outside of peak traffic hours so as to best enable a comfortable travel time for the member of the Illuminati coming to wipe your memory. Thank you. As you can imagine, they are very busy. Now, one last thing, let's mention COAG, which is an acronym, COAG, not just a weird name of an orc in Lord of the Rings. So Labour Prime Minister Paul Keating did this thing in 1992 where he was like, hey, there's 3 tiers of government. And then someone in the distance yelled, no there isn't, they're lying to you. Wake up sheeple, local government doesn't exist. And Paul Keating ignored this and just went on to create COAG, or the Coalition of Australian Governments, which is the combination of the President of the Australian Local Government Association, the State Premiers, the Territory Chief Ministers, and the Prime Minister. They met twice a year to discuss things of national significance and coordinate together. Because there's 3 tiers of government, right? Of course they should talk to each other. And then there was peace and harmony between the 3 levels of government until the coronavirus pandemic attacked. COAG was dissolved. COAG, like a bath bomb, was dissolved in March of 2020 and replaced with the National Cabinet, which is pretty much kind of similar, only it doesn't involve local government. It was created by Liberal Prime Minister Scott Morrison as a way to coordinate the national response to COVID-19, and it meets way more often. This does not mean that local government has been banished to the shadow realm and lost legitimacy. It's still out there activating trump cards. It's just that, its relationship with how the federal government makes certain decisions has changed slightly. I can guarantee you there will still be funding for roads delivered via the state by the federal government. I can be pretty confident of that, and I don't even have psychic powers as far as you're aware. As you can see, local government is like a whole thing. They didn't just make it up to trick you into paying rates. That you kinda have to do. What you don't have to do, but would be really appreciated and very kind, is support me on Patreon, where I can continue making free educational videos for everyone. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. Share this with someone that you know doesn't like local government. Comment down what you would like to learn about next, and thank you once again for watching, and I will see you next time.